Everyone, let's welcome Brittni Liyanage to Dragon Talk. Welcome!
Yay!
So excited
Hello.
you're here.
Hi, Brittni.
Thanks for having me.
This almost
Great
tore
to be
my
here.
ear off. Jeez, I was in my enthusiasm to have you here.
I'm sorry you had to come to that, but
Wow. Me too. But it's very exciting to have you here. Thank you. Yeah.
We have to provide all of the enthusiasm of an studio audience.
yeah,
so.
I feel the energy. It's
And
like we're here, we're all together.
It's dangerous work sometimes, but
right.
it's a risk that I take to make our guests feel at home.
You do
Much
a lot
appreciated.
of dangerous work, Brittni, on the D20 Dames podcast.
yeah. Oh
Very
yeah, so
dangerous.
dangerous.
That crew,
So
they
dangerous.
are wild.
Yeah. They are a podcast which is known for not doing too much combat, but talking our way out of situations. Yeah, that's kind of our MO. Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite bits are all of your downtime episodes where it's like downtime. And I'm like, oh, I love that is being dramatized because it's such an important part of the D&D experience.
It's so much fun for us. We haven't actually, we kind of have peppered downtime in like throughout our episodes now, but we used to in our first season, second season, we used to have explicit, you're about to level up or you just leveled up and we're having downtime. What are you doing? And like Maris, who plays Rose, would like go to the shop and then interact with the shopkeeper and make our DM Kat like give that shopkeeper a name and a backstory and personality. And it was, those things are so fun. And you could skip them entirely. What we thought would happen was people would just skip those. And what ended up happening is people were looking forward to them. And in our like reviews, people would mention, oh, their downtime is so fun. And we were like, wait, people want to hear that? People want more downtime? This is okay, because it's our most fun thing to do, like role play, heavy role play. So yeah, that was a pleasant surprise when we first started doing those.
Yeah, you're right. And it's because there is so much raw creativity happening in those episodes. As you said, like it's just improv, which you are a big part of, right? As far as embodying some of these NPCs, especially in later seasons, right?
Yeah. In fact, I don't know any other podcasts that actually do this, but I would love to hear more because I'd love to meet people that do this. But when we first started, I knew I was going to edit the podcast and I was going to like act as producer. And I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to take. And when I started diving into like the software, I was like, oh, this is going to be hours of my life. Like this is going to be days. And so I wasn't sure that I wanted to actually build a character and play it. And so I presented that as like an option. I was like, hey, y'all, what if I didn't play a character? Interesting for a D&D podcast. What if I just edited? And everyone was like, yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I think we have enough of us playing. But as we started, Kat, our DM, who was like writing all of our adventures, was like, what if you played an NPC every now and then? I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. And so the first string that I played Sildar Hallwinter, which is not an NPC that Kat invented. He exists in D&D lore. But I started playing Sildar as like the quest bringer, basically. And people loved him because I just played him as like a goofy version of my dad combined with like a retired Disney princess or Disney prince. And he was just goofy and like not at all what I think Sildar is supposed to be and like is written as like, Lord's Alliance fighter. I was just like, nope, he's going to be super weird and he's going to be super goofy and like has a bunch of kids who kind of resent him. Like it'll be hilarious. And it was hilarious. So I ended up playing him over and over and over again. And we kept bringing him back. And then when the Dames moved on from Phandalin, where like Sildar kind of is stuck, I started playing another NPC. I started playing one of our characters' sisters. And yeah, it just kind of worked. I'm not playing a playable character. I have a character sheet, but it's kind of been dictated by Jen, who plays Riot, the sister of the character I was playing, and Kat, the DM, and we kind of just like collabed on it. And I get to know like Kat's secrets. She tells me things, hey, in this next episode, these couple of beats are supposed to happen, and I need you to kind of push this over here. And it just like, it felt like it was going to be a little forced, but when we play it, it doesn't feel that way at all. It feels super natural. I'm just kind of like DM Junior, like kind of there on the side, like pushing things along. It's really fun. It's really interesting. Yeah.
So you, as you're talking and my eyes just went wide because I think this is a brilliant idea, especially for a new dungeon master who, having the NPC, a more experienced player or dungeon master playing the role of all these NPCs, because the way you said, like, she asks you, like, I need these beats to happen. I need you to help make that happen. What? That is such a cool idea.
Yeah, it worked. Again, at first we were like, is that going to feel like maybe that's a little, but like, no, it's what she's doing really at the end of the day. But I can help it out from being like kind of the person on the inside. And yeah, it's worked out really well. I can also do the same thing. Like if Jen wanted to make something happen or have a conversation, she could tell me like, hey, is it cool if Karen does this thing, this episode? Like it can kind of work for everyone.
Yeah.
And not just the DM. So yeah, as much as I can, I talk about this relationship that Kat and I have built where she's a DM and I'm an NPC, because it really is, it's added some really cool storytelling aspects to our whole arc that I don't think we would have gotten any other way. And also it gives me time to not have to like think about what this character development is going to be. I kind of just get to come in, play. I'm like a character step parent or something. Like I just jump in, I play the fun stuff, and then I like peace out.
You're the aunt.
No consequences.
You're the aunt or uncle. Yeah.
I don't have to make any, when they're
make a
like
mess.
a real decision, I'm just like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
It's great. I'm the cool aunt.
It's like, you're exactly the cool aunt. You just come in, you get everybody riled up, and then you leave.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, it's bedtime. See you later.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So it's also it could be a cool way to get somebody into D&D playing that maybe has a little hesitation or, just show up and just be this shopkeeper that interacts with us once in a while. But do your NPCs, are they like essentially, are they part of the party? Like, do you go off on adventures with them? And
so Sildar wasn't. Sildar was like around sending you off to do other things. And then when you came back, he would, write you a check for doing the thing. He was just kind of like typical quest bringer NPC. Karen, who's Riot's sister, actually joined the party, which was a little bit of a different dynamic and worked out really well. So, I do participate in combat, and the only thing I didn't do is level up, really. I kind of was in stasis as an NPC while everyone was leveling up around me. But yeah, Karen is an actual member of the party, which is again, because I try not to make too many decisions because I know a little bit too much. It often is me being there to facilitate things, but not making big calls. Not if me in character as Karen wants to really go fight a thing, I'm not going to distract the whole party to go do that thing, because I want the playable characters to be able to do that. But
unless Kat told you to, or asked you to.
Yes.
Which does happen. Sometimes Kat will say, they're really going to want to go do that thing, but we've got to go over there. It's like, yeah, because it's the other thing too. We are playing, but we're recording a podcast. So like, if this were a home game, this idea of me playing an NPC would be really, really fun. And I probably would take it to different heights. But I do try to stay on track. We're not a podcast that's on rails in any way, but we do have a story. We do have like deadlines and schedules and, the stuff that comes along with having a podcast. So it just adds a little bit more consistency into a game that can be, not consistent at all. And that's what people love about it sometimes. So
what I like about this setup, and it's similar to what I've heard of, say the Dragon Friends do something similar where they have a performer who is basically all the NPCs for the group, changing his voice and stuff for different ones during the course of a session. So they'll be in a session, and I've heard of the guys from D4 who are co-DMs, and they have a similar thing, right? But what I like about all this is that it breaks down the barrier between like story games and D&D, like because D&D has this idea that the story, for better or worse, this is an idea from when it was first published, but that the story comes from the DM. Like the DM is the only player at the table that can shape the reality. And then I think as we've gone closer to more modern games and RPGs, that is shared more with the players. Like the ability to world build and create and embody these NPCs is shared a lot more with everybody at the table. And you're just embodying that to a T, right? Like being like, oh, I have my own agency. I can do things I want to do, but I'm also taking cues from everybody else and
Mhm.
being that glue between what used to be a very adversarial relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. When we started D20 Dames, which I didn't even tell you guys what D20 Dames is. I mean, I know you
Yes.
know, but yeah, when we started, so 3 years ago, we started, which is so long, that time, what is time? But 3 years ago, we started this podcast and we decided we were going to play D&D. We decided we were going to be, all female cast, all female, like produced, like we were just going to do it all ourselves, start from the ground up. We started with this premise that we wanted to do. We were all very excited about the role play aspect. We were excited to play D&D too, but we were excited mostly about role play in general. And so I think, pretty quickly wrote like kind of a log line for us that was like, D20 Dames is a storytelling podcast powered by D&D. And then we had that and we were like, oh yeah, that is what it is that we are trying to do here. We are trying to tell a story. We are trying to create characters and rich backstory and all of this stuff. And we're not going to put that all on Kat. We're going to do it together. And it's going to be mechanically D&D underneath. So we'll roll up characters and we'll have combat and we'll do those things, but at the expense of the story is first. And so once we locked that in and we felt like we knew what we were doing, then things like me not actually playing and being an NPC was not that hard to conceive, right? We're like, oh, well, we're a storytelling podcast. It also meant that when we started, we had to make some decisions around like, well, do you have to know how to play D&D to listen to our podcast? Do we need to keep in things like explaining what this role is or explaining what this spell does? Or do we just say, instead of saying what mechanically the spell does, you just describe what it looks like? And is that enough, right? And so I think at the beginning, we just did all of that. And then I edited it as I needed to. But it made decisions around what to keep in and take out really easy, right? Because you have this kind of like mission statement. And if we had switched that mission statement around and said, we are a D&D podcast with some storytelling, right? I think we would have a different podcast, right? I think we would maybe explain roles more and get in the nitty gritty details and get into like, the classic case of like, can I do this spell in this amount of feet? Or, we would get really tied up in those like details, and we just don't, Kat uses her best judgment and lets us do what we generally want to do. So yeah, it's interesting that one sentence kind of shaped what we're still doing today.
Yeah. And when I like that you say you're not going to put that all on Kat, who is the dungeon master. But so what is how are the stories generated? Like, what's the dynamic between players and dungeon master? Like, do you guys contribute? Like, do you say these are the types of stories we want to tell, or is it just inspired by what Kat is laying before you?
Yeah, Kat is a genius. She's an incredible writer. It's wild, some of the stuff that she comes up with on very short notice often. But when we first started, she sent out like a Google form that was like a survey, to tell about your character, give some details. Like, I think it was actually pretty extensive. I think maybe also when I got it, I was like, oh, I have to do this. Maybe I should just edit. I think that maybe was the thing that made me scared about being a player, because it was very long. It's oh no, Kat, please.
Let me choose the technical side of things.
And I know editing a podcast cannot be easy. So for that, you chose that route instead of filling out your Google form.
Some days I'm like, maybe I should have filled out that Google form. But it was extensive. Yeah, shakes fist, exactly. It was really extensive. But everyone filled it out that was playing, that were playing characters. And I just recently found out, as we were recording our season 3 finale and like kind of interlude thing for between season 3 and season 4, we did like a behind the scenes little chat back with each other. And some of the stuff that had been revealed in those episodes we just recorded were from that form. From years ago, from 3 years ago now. She's like, oh, well, that's something that Maris thought of.
Oh, wow.
In the form. I was like, what, how, what, are you kidding me? So this is why I say Kat's a genius, because, at the time, all the output of that form was probably just, complete random stories, complete random fiction that we all just made up for our characters. And she's still weaving it into the story today. So that's from the very beginning. And then I know we have a Slack, and I know she has side conversations with Jess and, hey, what is Lariah's dad? Give me some storyline about Lariah's dad, or if Lariah were in this situation, how would she react? So I know that happens. I'm not part of it because I also like to be kept in the dark about something so that I have like real reactions when we record. So I know that that's happening all the time. And it's like, a continuous process, but it blew my mind that she's still pulling things from that Google form.
That is
all these years later. It's all coming into play now.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
now my kingdom for players that want to write that much backstory. I want that. Sometimes,
I know, that's
people are just like, yeah, no, he's a fighter and he's gonna swing a sword. And I'm like, all right, but give me something that I can go off of, even if it's one detail. And it's great that there was this wealth of stuff that Kat could pull from. And you're totally right. Like being able to, that ability to take random details and present them in such a way over, a 3-year period. That is a form of genius that I don't think everybody has.
Yeah. Yeah. She amazes me every single time we record. There's something, she also has all these characters, I say, I play a single important-ish NPC and she's playing 50 not as important, but still actual NPCs, right? She's keeping all of these things in her head. So, I could gush about Kat all day. She's just really, it's a lot of work that she puts in the podcast. And I'm always kind of talking about it because you don't realize. It's also something that I like, it's a word of warning of like, it would be that hard to do this if we were doing an at-home game, right? She would have that much work. She would have that much to do, but she does it on a schedule. She does it and we record it. It's a lot. It's a lot.
it is.
Yeah.
Kat does not make me want to be a dungeon master. The more you tell me about her,
I should be selling it a little bit better.
No, she is amazing, and but your whole group is amazing because you're all, like you said, contributing to that story.
Yeah, and we've had Jen and Kat on Dragon Talk before. It's been a little while since we've been able to check in with them, but they bring such a wonderful thing to this podcast. But it's really exciting to talk to you because that production side of things is not something that we really discuss a lot on this, right? And there is a lot of people out there who are listening to this who, were thinking about starting up a podcast or a video series using Dungeons and Dragons in a similar way, as a framework for storytelling. But what could you give as guidance to some of those people? Because you had to do it within a trial by fire to a certain way about like how to figure out how to edit and make all these things come to life in ways that might not be the instinct when you're starting a project.
Yeah, this is a tough one. So when we started, we treated everything we were doing as a business. I think when you take, several business-minded, perfectionist women and you put them together.
It's a recipe for fun.
Sounds great.
Exactly. But the output, it's like 1 + 1 + 1. Like the output can't be anything but professional perfection, right? You can't, there's no weak link in the chain that doesn't exist. Like we're all up here trying to just do exactly the perfect thing, which had problems, right? Took us a long time to kind of ramp up, and we wanted to get all the perfect gear before we even started. And that was a little expensive. I wouldn't recommend that for anyone, but it's the way that we went. And so we had really, really clear intentions when we went in. And those clear intentions were, we're going to try to record with the best quality we can, and we'll improve it as we go, but at least let's have a good starting point. We are going to edit the podcast. We are not going to just play a game, record it, and then put it on the internet. I say that because that is totally valid. That is totally a thing you can do. If you're already playing a home game and you just want to record it, whether it's for like posterity's sake, or you just want your mom to hear it, or you want to maybe build a following of people that are listening to your home game, that is awesome. Like why not do that? We're all in front of our computers anyways, record your Zoom call, record whatever you need to record, and just, put it up on YouTube. Why not? If that's what you're going to do, make that intention known, right? If you have one person in your group who's like, oh, wait, we're just recording what we're doing and not editing it, and there's going to be no cool sound effects, and right, like you already have misalignment. So when we went in, we knew that's not what we were going to do, but not to say that that's not something that you can do. It's just about making sure everyone's on the same page because that's a awkward thing to learn after
Halfway
you're
through.
3 recordings in and you're like, wait a second. So things like that are really important to talk about. But the aspect of just kind of putting it up on YouTube or putting it up on a podcast feed without editing it, or just editing out, maybe breaks and chunks like that. That's something that I would say, I kind of wish I did that with my very first D&D session that I ever did, because it was actually remote. We were all on a Discord call, and we could have done that. And now I think back and I'm like, oh, there was these fun things we did, and I'd listen to that. Like I would listen to that, but we don't have it, right? Because it wasn't a normal thing to do. So maybe start there, right? Just start recording your own home sessions. If you want to go further, sure, try it. But again, know that it's going to be some work. Know that maybe if you're playing a character who has a really big storyline and you're going to be the editor, it just takes a lot of time, and you have a full-time job and also a part-time, some of these things take a lot of time. That's another thing that we tried to be clear about with our podcast is like, we have members of the group that are like business members and contribute to the business, because we actually have like an LLC behind our podcast as well. Those people will be like, we'll have business meetings and talk about like money and like sponsors and like boring stuff like that. But we also have cast members who are just there to come and play and contribute to the story. And then they don't necessarily need to care about the business side. If they want to be involved, they can let that be known. And then we can make sure we include everyone. But having that separation is really nice too, because if you want to be a group of 5 and 2 of you are like kind of leading the production side of things and 3 of you are just playing, sure. As long as everyone agrees, that makes a lot of sense. But it's like, this is the product manager in me is coming out, because it's really just about setting those clear intentions and like, listing down what everyone's roles are, even if one of the roles is you're just playing. That's fine. Just as long as it's written down.
It sounds basically like you need to have a session 0 for not just the campaign, but for your endeavor in a way.
Yeah.
Right? Like you need to be like clearly define your roles, know who is going to be, the tank as far as business stuff goes, and who's going to be the pure creative, and who's going to be the spellcaster, weaving all of the audio together into something that makes sense. I'm stretching this metaphor, but
it was working. I was
good. I was following.
Wow, you should write this down.
I'm taking notes right now. But it's really interesting because a lot of people don't realize the work that goes into it, right? Like there is these roles, and it can be very tempting just to be like, oh, we'll just throw on the microphones and we'll make it done. And you can certainly do that and learn as you go, which many people have done before. But having some of this experience of creating this podcast and making it work and having the amount of followers and listeners that you do, you get a leg up when you plan ahead, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Project managers out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the other thing too that we did when we first started, which was we gave ourselves a buffer by starting our set. It was kind of like a session 0, but it was like a playable session 0 where we used pre-written content. So we used the Involos Wake adventure, and we used a couple of sessions of that as our first like kind of like almost like a pilot. We almost basically recorded a pilot, and that meant that Kat didn't have to write a bunch of content like ahead of time, and also write a bunch of content that was going to be recorded on really crappy mic setups and like, you get the kinks out, right? So we actually have like our first 3 or 4 episodes is this like pilot, and we ended up calling it our season 0. So that if you want to start at the beginning, we recommend you start at our season 1, which was after that, and then it's all Kat's original content from there. But you could go back and listen to those old ones. That was a really, I don't know whose idea it was, but it was a really good idea, because in the worst case scenario is that those turned out terribly and we could have just not released them. We ended up releasing them, but it gave us that opportunity to test out the other thing is we had never played with each other before. We had never played D&D together. And also Kat had only DM'd like a couple games before this. These are all
Yeah.
wild things when I say them out loud, but
It is.
This is true.
And it's amazing that it's worked so well, but
Yes,
it has.
I think there's a lot of luck along the way. But yeah, so we started really, really from like the kind of base. It's really just a testament that like, if you want to do this and if you have any desire at all, you can do it. Because we did it. That's kind of like, yeah, that's the best I can tell you.
Good lessons. So editing can really shape a story, obviously. So like, do you have creative freedom from the group to kind of, do what you think is best for the story, or do you have to like run bigger changes by them, or how does that work?
So sometimes while we're recording, Kat will take some notes of like, oh, there was a weird section here, and it kind of threw us off. If you want to just take that out, you can.
Okay.
So sometimes I have notes like that. Most of the time, I'm taking out things for timing and like beats. Often, a lot of the times, it's like roles and people doing math. We're all brilliant, but sometimes the math is hard, and so I'm often taking that out. So makes it sound like we, roll 16, and we just knew it right away. Magic of editing. You're welcome, James. We're all brilliant. Sometimes it's. So the other thing that we do is I will edit to my heart's content. I will just take out what I think should be taken out. And then we do like a feedback cycle. So maybe it's Jen's week and she'll listen to it and find other things that she wants to take out. But since we've been doing this for several years now, our rhythm is kind of there. We used to have everyone listen to it, which is so much time for everyone. So we've cut that down. But yeah, and then we also used to, speaking of like editing, making the story, and this is maybe a tip or not a non-tip, at the very beginning when we were recording years ago, we all were like, oh, it'd be cool if we had tavern sounds. It'd be cool if you could hear the creak. And I'm like, yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Not doing that. Only because I'm sitting here spending 8 hours, editing a single episode, figuring out at the time I was using GarageBand, which was like maybe the biggest mistake I'd made. I'm now using Audition, but I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to make quick keys to make things easier. I'm already trying to optimize, and people are asking for more. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, I know Tavern Sounds seems like a good idea, but I didn't want to commit to it because if I put Tavern Sounds in season 1, episode 3, our listeners are going to be like, wait, why did season 1, episode 4 have crickets? And I don't mean crickets, but I mean nothing, right? Like, what, you set expectations for your audience. Again, if we were doing a home game and some days we wanted to play background noise and some days we didn't, no one's going to, flip the table. But when you are putting it out for an audience there, you're starting to set expectations with the community. So I just didn't want to do that yet. So I kept putting it on ice. I was like, we'll get there. We'll figure it out. Now I put that stuff in. 1, because editing doesn't take me as long. There's a learning curve and I met it. 2, I'm using a far better software. And 3, we found a really good source for this type of content to layer in. We use Tabletop Audio, and it just has everything I could. I very, very rarely have to go to another source to find things to kind of fill in the background. And it kind of set a precedence. If you listen to an episode, it's not going to have background stuff the entire time. It'll have it when it's appropriate. I'll use it for like emotional moments, things like that. So I built up to it, and I was very adamant about not just doing it because we thought it was going to be cool, because I knew that was going to come back to haunt me.
Yeah.
In the end.
That's a big commitment when you're editing. I mean, people don't realize, but for, and you can probably correct me on this, but if you're doing like an hour-long podcast, editing that can be 8, 10, sometimes 20 hours, just trying to make sure that you're doing the right ins and outs and making the transitions that you're creating by excising out parts don't feel weird or off-put. So there's all that stuff that has to go into it. And so adding in more sounds to that just adds maybe even exponentially to that number of, especially when you're not as used to it. So that's a huge commitment to editing. And it's a big reason why people will sometimes just turn it on and turn it off when you're done, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, talk a little bit more. I mean, maybe I'm geeking out a little bit because I'm also editing a little bit of a podcast on my own for something else. But you used GarageBand and then you went to Audition. What's Audition? What is that?
Adobe Audition.
Okay.
So the Adobe like Creative Suite's version of, audio editor. It's basically, if you know Premiere, the video editing, it's Premiere without the video. So it's just the audio section of it. It's great. So, you open it up and you're like, what is this? How would I ever do anything? I spent maybe a weekend on YouTube, in Googling weird stuff like compressor podcast, female voice, things like that. I should probably go back and figure out like all the things I Googled because it's, random, but everything exists on the internet. And so I found an answer to almost everything I was looking for. And when I didn't find an answer, I just, tried it until it worked. So the transition from GarageBand, and I use GarageBand because I was familiar with it. I have done music production thingies in the past. And so GarageBand is just kind of like the easiest pre-installed version to do stuff like that. So I was just like, oh, it has a podcast setting. It must be good for podcasts. And so I started there. And not that it's not good for podcasts. It's just doesn't have the flexibility and it's a little bit stickier. And when I say stickier, I mean like it takes me longer to do things in GarageBand. So started using Audition, hit a huge wall where I was like, had optimized my flow for GarageBand, where I cut my time in half. And then I got to Audition and had to start over. I was back to, these 8-hour full day edit sessions for a single, hour and a half session. I do not miss those days. But now it's like, breathing. I open it up and I can just go right in and I have like presets, I go through and I filter, do certain compression and certain equalizer and certain, noise reduction. And I can do it while, sitting on the couch watching, Netflix. And then I go in and start, chopping away. So my advice would be like, don't be afraid of software. Just give yourself that weekend. Give yourself that weekend to hunker down and be on YouTube and go into those like YouTube rabbit holes. Like you're going to find some weird stuff and then you're going to find the thing you're looking for. So you just have to like get through the weird stuff.
Safe search on.
Yeah, safe search on. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Try the kids' YouTube. Maybe you'll find more. I don't know.
But that is really good advice because I'm sure people have experienced this in different aspects of their life. One for me is getting into like a rental car and being like, how do I connect Bluetooth? There's a video for that about every single model of cars out there now, which is amazing. But if the same is true for editing software, and you and I have experienced that where I'm like, well, how do I do this one thing? I don't know. This is really opaque interface for me. And then there's your Google foo has to get a little bit of an increase because you have to like see what terms you like and which people are better at explaining for your specific brain pattern, which is its own special thing to realize. But you're right. You can just do it by topic. You're like, oh, I'm stuck on something. Let me research that. Okay, and then go back. Or you can do like you said, just go down the rabbit hole and consume a whole bunch of it and hope a lot of it gets in there. And it's great for that. And it boils down to just do and learn as you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Greg, what do you use for editing right now?
So it's funny you mentioned Audition because I wasn't aware of that product, but I was using Premiere, just only using the audio parts of it, not the video parts of it.
You will love Audition.
Yeah, so I didn't want to be distracted, but I was like, oh, maybe I could go download that right now.
And we lost Greg, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be looking at YouTube videos, learning how to do this right now.
There you go. Let me know if you need any tips.
Yeah, because I started on a couple, and for people, the comparison for GarageBand to Premiere is, the idea that like, oh, it's like Movie Maker or the really simple built-in video editing that is in there. Yes, you can do it, and it's good for simple projects and to learn the basics of editing. But if you want to get to the nitty-gritty, having every ability at your fingertips, that's why you need the more kind of professional software. But it's probably better to start with the simple interface that you can understand and then realize where the limitations are. And then you're like, oh, I can exceed those limitations by jumping into something a little bit more robust.
For sure.
Super nerdy. And I'm not talking about D&D.
Shelly, when are we going to start recording you as Dungeon Master? And you're going to edit it as well, right?
Oh my God. Two things that I fear greatly.
Easy.
don't-
You just need a weekend, Shelley. You just need a
Yeah,
weekend.
just and
YouTube rabbit hole.
rabbit holes, weekend, compressing my voice.
Yeah,
and
something.
we're good
Something.
to go. Well, if I had an NPC or person who's willing to like, herd my cats around, maybe it would be.
I
easier.
am on call. It's on my resume.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So
Really?
whatever you need.
On
So what do you
call
do best?
NPC.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I should put that on a card. That's fun.
Yeah, I like it. So if it's okay with you, can we talk a little bit go back to D20 Dames podcast? Are you guys done with your?
That's what
Are we
we've been
done? Yeah,
talking
this is
about.
the tech talk segment. We can close
You
it.
done with the tech talk? Okay. So one of the things that I think that you all do really well, that you're really known for, is being family friendly. And I always see fathers are love to get especially their daughters, watch or listening to D20 Dames, and always calling out the D20 Dames as great role models and great way to introduce their kids to D&D. Was that always your intention when you guys started to present a podcast in being so family friendly and inclusive and empowering?
The short answer is no. And I will tell you that our first concept for a campaign was that we were all criminals and we met in a prison cell. I can't remember. I'm not sure why this was going to be a thing, but it was like we were going to do like a rat girls spin or something.
Mhm.
Anyways, clearly not
Yeah.
friendly. But when we put our business hat on and we were thinking about what we were trying to build and the type of community we were trying to build, and kind of also looking at the spectrum of what was out then, we were like, okay, there's clearly a gap for, an all-female podcast. There's clearly a gap for, I don't think we noticed it as family friendly. I think what we noticed it as was like, not mature. Everything we were coming across was mature. I distinctly remember I don't know if this is the same timing, but I listened to the Adventure Zone, and I've been listening to my brother and me for 10 years now, which again, time is weird. And so I listened to the Adventure Zone, and if someone had asked me if that was family friendly, I'd be like, yeah, of course, it's a family. It's a family playing D&D, of course. And I remember they put out their first graphic novel, and on the first page was the F word, and I was like, oh my gosh, like children listen to this. I thought like it didn't even occur to me. So, again, like when you looked at the landscape, it wasn't that there was nothing that was like labeled as family friendly or anything like that. It was just all by default mature. There was cursing, and there was just, or maybe it was super, super gratuitous and like violence. And so again, when we're trying to look for those avenues where we can kind of fit in and provide something that wasn't being provided, that was something that jumped out. So I think the way this manifested is we started recording, and some of us started swearing, and we really paused and thought like, oh, do we want to curse? Is that something we want to do? Because we have to know this now. And I think logistically, a podcast, when you put your podcast up on the feed, you don't have to, but you should mark if it's explicit, right? And so from a pure practicality standpoint, we're like, well, we don't want to mark it as explicit. We want our content to get out to as many people as possible. And if explicit is a flag that's going to be like, oh, no, not going to do that, let's not do that. So we just started going without being too, we said, a couple, PG curse words. But that kind of is just something that worked naturally. And then you build on the characters. So we have Maris, who's playing Rose, who's just like the sweetest monk that ever was, who just wants to hang out with people and like make friends with kobolds. That was not something we decided. She just like was that. And then you have, Riot, who is this like demon child who's trying to look for her siblings, but also is just like rad and super cool, and also doesn't really want to like use fighting as the first tactic. Like everyone just kind of fell, like our party kind of fell into that pattern. I say ours, but I mean theirs. It fell into that. So what we got after those first few sessions was like, oh, this is a family friendly podcast. We just made an all ages podcast. We made a podcast that people can download and listen to in the car with their kids. without feeling awkward about it, or without feeling like they have to turn it down when they hit a really gruesome part or anything like that. And I think our goal was really just to hit as many people as we possibly could and not make anyone feel, really uncomfortable listening to what we were putting, which there's places in every corner of the internet and the podcast world for every little niche thing you want to do. And we were just trying to cast a really wide net. So that's kind of how things ended up. And then we started getting those reviews and tweets, I'm a dad and I listened to it with my daughter, and we're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Totally fine. Yeah, we love that. Just like kind of unbelievable and unexpected. And it only makes us want to do that more. So then we kind of just double down on it. Yeah.
I love that. I do. Yeah. And so obviously you have a really supportive community and a lot of loyal listeners. So was there what sorts of things do you guys do to interact with your community or to build that community and foster that?
Yeah, I think so. It starts with when we first started, the community of other kind of independent podcasts was really it was like a pretty tight knit community that we got into. And especially we're, relatively Seattle based, and there's a lot of other kind of Seattle based podcasting community, especially role playing and especially D&D that we kind of, got attached to. So our community kind of stems from that, which is really nice. It's really, really open and welcoming and inclusive. And, we, often cite some of our, best friend podcasters as like the Queens of Adventure, which is, drag queens playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is fantastic, right? They clearly have a type of community and it intersects with ours, not entirely like a circle, more like a stretched out Venn diagram, but still there's an intersection, and it's fun to start building our communities off of that. So a lot of our community stems from like other podcasts. So that was a great start for us. Nowadays, as we're kind of cultivating our community like on its own, we're finding Discord is like, it's amazing. So we have a Patreon and we've linked it to a Discord. And so if you support us on Patreon at any level, you get access to our Discord, and it's just the most fun. We have a channel for pets, and people are always putting their pet pictures in there. We have a channel for crafts because most of us love to craft, and we see people's updates on like what they're, scarf they made or what cross stitch they're making. We have a food channel, obviously. We have a random channel. And it's just like so pleasantly active. And I wish we had done it sooner. I wish we had done it from day one because it's really, really kind of the thing that makes me feel like I want to keep putting this podcast out. I want to grow this community. These people on Discord, I want this to grow, and I want everyone to meet each other. People have met in the Discord and now do like crafting nights together. People have met in the Discord and now have spun up their own Discords or invited them to their own channels. And some of them stream on Twitch, and you can see those people that are from our Discord in that Twitch stream as chat. It's just like, I'm literally like watching a community be built, before my very eyes. And so it's, major props to Discord because it really kind of jump-started our interaction and engagement with the community. It was there, and we were using Twitter, and we were, kind of engaging that way, but it's not the same as now what we have with Discord and kind of making that like our home. I
like that Discord has become not just what we used to refer to as platforms, but like just a place to hang out. Like it's people's old IRC channels. When back in the day when folks didn't have anywhere to hang out, they would just go on these bulletin boards and just be like, oh, there's people like me. And Discord has done that and let you create those so easily that it just is. Here's where like-minded people who are opting in to this community. So I really like that it's tied to a Patreon or something like that, so that it is something that you have to choose to want to be a part of, rather than just doing flyby. I feel like you have an investment in the community when you're doing it that way. It's very interesting. I want to explore it even more. That idea.
It's a good time.
Discord.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We got the D&D one as well too, and it's exploding and getting more people involved, and it's going to be a boon for sure. I really just want to make sure and call out that I love the double bill of D20 Dames and Queens of Adventure performing live. I guess that was the last couple of years at PAX West.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think. At
2 years ago?
Kremwork. Yeah.
At Kremwork. That
Yep.
was super fun to watch you guys perform and then have, because you're talking about family friendly. Your portion was definitely still very family friendly, although they did
Yes.
veer a little bit into possibly your most risque parts
Yep.
of your recordings.
Yep.
But then it goes in a completely different direction when Matt Baum and the Queens arrive.
Yeah, it was perfect. We were the matinee. They were the late night show. It worked out. It was exactly, we were like, this is kind of genius. Like, you're obviously not going to bring your kids to a nightclub, but we put it out as a podcast so everyone can hear it. But yeah, we did a cool I say we, but Kat and Matt collabed it behind the scenes to do an interesting kind of tie both of the storylines together. So we started it and there was like a relic and that relic got passed into their story and then they used it. So if you stayed for both shows, there was kind of a tie-in. So yeah, that was, man, I wish we could do something. I mean, we could do something like that again on the internet, but there's something really special about that room. And it was a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how much of your role playing and decisions that you make at the table are impacted by the fact that that you have this audience, this community who are watching and paying attention? That's something we always kind of struggle with, because there's, as you mentioned, there's there's the home games where it doesn't necessarily matter, but it must be front and center to a certain extent that you're going to have an audience watching the choices that you make.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think not to try to speak for any of the Dames in particular, but a good example of this actually is sometimes it's hard because I, as an NPC playing Karen who has some secrets, I'm going to back up because if you watch a TV show and you see what's happening and you're like, if that character would just tell this character what's going on, this whole episode wouldn't be needed. And you get that frustration where you're like, just tell them, the comedy of errors kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I am always that person who's like, why is this even an episode? Just talk to them and then it's solved, right? But now I'm in it, right? I can't just tell Jess or, Lariah, played by Jess, I can't just tell her all the things, even though she's like, it's so frustrating. Just tell me what's going on. For the storyline and for our audience and to tell a compelling story, I have to keep things back, even though I think it's not in my nature as Brittni, who's a person who just will just, word vomit on you all the things I'm thinking. But Karen has to be sneakier and she has an agenda and she can't just give it all up on episode 1. She needs to sprinkle it through. And so that definitely affects how I play, particularly. Like, again, I could do things. I have free will. Kat's not really, a true puppet master of me, but I can't just say everything, right? And so again, I'm not doing this as a home game. As a home game, maybe I could be my own PC and I can, if I trust Lariah, I could go tell Lariah everything and we could have maybe even have a side conversation in a home game and we could, that could happen, but it's hard to do that on a podcast, right? I can't really edit that exactly right. So there's things that happen that are kind of secret that I can't really talk about. And then Kat is brilliant. She has also conceived of times when we'll record little side things or everyone else will leave the recording and we'll record a little side conversation. Again, like you wouldn't do that in a home game. We're doing it for the audience. And oftentimes Jen, who's not part of the conversation potentially, the first time she hears that is when the podcast airs, right?
Oh.
Which is wild. It's so cool. But, we have to kind of think about things in like a multi-layered way, which gets confusing. Again, these are things that like Kat has in her mind. I try to desperately write on notes and things like that, but it can get a little complicated because we're trying to make a story that will make sense to the audience, but maybe doesn't line up with what we all know as playable characters or non-playable characters at the time. So it can get really wild, honestly.
That's interesting. I almost wondered too about the negative of that or the reaction to that, like how important that is. That because, for example, Jen may know that you're having this private session, but doesn't know what occurs in it, and will that change what she's think even on a meta level that you can't necessarily prevent? should be like, oh, maybe there's something being told there. And it reminds me of an acting teacher that I had in at the University of Connecticut who would, the name for what he did, I'll tell you later, but it ended up happening so often that it had a technique name to it. But he would pull people, like in doing a scene, he would pull one of the performers aside in class and have like a private conversation, but like in full view of everyone, but he would be whispering to them. But what he'd be whispering me was, I don't really have anything to tell you. I just want there to be a separation from what you're happening with the actor. So just pretend that I'm giving you some very important direction, and then you're taking it in, and then we'll go back into the scene with this, private moment having been witnessed by everyone in the room. And then they would go back and do the scene, and it would hit differently. Not necessarily, better every single time, but it would definitely try to hit, and it would be a nice way to get through a blockage in the scene or something like that. And then everybody started, because the professor's name was Bob. Everyone would be like, "Oh, did he do Secret Bob time with you? Oh, okay. Oh, it's time for Secret Bob time. Okay, let's go do that." So I don't necessarily think that anybody wants to start doing this in their games or anything like that, but it does make me think that might be really valuable in certain situations where you want to. It's not necessarily even what you say in these private conversations. It's the fact that it was private and that it was away from the rest of the group, and what that might mean, and what division or suspicion it might sow.
Yeah. I like a D&D session with, some past notes and some things only and this, whether that note says like there's nothing on here, I'm just trying to throw off everyone else, like that's cool too. Like that, add some intrigue and some mystery. But it's actually even easier to do while we're recording. We've always recorded remotely, but for someone who's only played in-person home games and was trying to figure out how to go remote, it's actually really like you can, deafen your microphone. You can make everyone basically not hear the rest of it, and you have a side conversation. It's actually very mechanically easy if you're using something like Discord voice channels and things like that. So, if you think that's not available to you if you're playing remotely now, like it actually is, and it's actually a lot easier, in my opinion. Also, chat is really nice too. You can literally DM a secret message or a secret non-message, which now I'm going to tell Kat that's a great idea. Maybe she's been doing that the whole time. I don't know.
Every single one of the meetings have been not real. Yeah.
You have reminded me of a time when I can tell you that is not always a good idea, because I remember in my first D&D group ever, the dungeon master pulled me out of the room, stood out in the hallway with me, and he was like, I don't have anything, much like Secret Bobbed me. And then he was like, I really just want to cast suspicion and like secrecy and like make the party not trust you. Okay, go back in there. I'm like, what? But I went back in, everyone was like, what happened? And I was like, nothing. Like, I wasn't.
Oh, no.
And then they kind of turned on me because they thought that I was withholding the secrets.
It's one thing if you had asked for that, right? If you had said, hey, I would love to plant a seed of suspicion with the rest of the party.
Yeah.
I to put that on you.
And I think because my character was like the most wholesome and most innocent and, most afraid of everything. I think he chose me to, maybe he was trying to like toughen her up or like give her an edge or something, but it kind of backfired because the rest of the party really never trusted me, and I didn't betray the dungeon master by saying he was doing this on purpose. I don't think they would have believed me.
He secret bobbed me.
He secret bobbed me,
and you didn't know that.
That was
but
yeah,
in another universe that would have made sense.
Now I feel like I need to go back in time and tell the party. I'm going to send them all
just send
an
them
email.
all a note now.
Guys, remember
like,
that time? I swear to God, I wasn't doing anything behind your back. Like, even like when it sort of died down, it would like bubble up again. Like if, I don't know, something would happen in the game and they would be like, maybe Astrid knows.
Maybe that was the thing that they talked
I don't.
No.
Yeah. So be careful. Be careful about with your secret bobs backfiring.
Yeah.
A backfire bob.
Sparingly, or at least with consent. I
Yes.
guess that makes sense.
Yeah, with consent, exactly.
the
like,
consent
hey, are you
part.
interested in doing this, secret thing? No. Okay, cool.
No,
I'll ask
I
the
don't
next
want to be
person.
used in that way.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. But.
Makes sense. Well, and that also, I mean, that we're running to the close here, but one thing I wanted to mention is that it does certainly happen where some people who are not used to playing together might not know that they're overstepping bounds or things like that, or unintentionally create situations that end up being uncomfortable, especially for women and marginalized groups in gaming spaces like this. So, that seems like it was close to that happening with you, Shelley. But I think that's something that is worth discussing. It's one of the reasons why you probably get all those comments like you do, that the D20 Dames is a great role model because it doesn't exhibit any of those behaviors.
Yeah, that's we are, again, professional perfectionist. We're also very open. Not that Kat ever really puts out things that would make people feel like they go over bounds. But if she were to ever do that, she would talk to us about it. We all are very much like yes or definitely not. There's very little gray area in the way that we kind of operate and behave. So, it's an important part of this whole thing too. It also plays into the editing too. Like, we know we can also fall back if we do record something that feels uncomfortable. Anyone can be like, hey, that part where when I said this phrase, can you just take that out? Let's completely retcon that. Like, beauty of, also not doing this live. Like, you can do stuff like that. Sometimes you say something, sometimes you slip out of character, and you want to kind of come back and be like, I don't think that, Karen would have said that, or I don't think that, Karen would have actually acted that way. And so, if you're kind of prioritizing what you're going to edit out of your podcast, awkward lulls in time, awkward math, and then like also people's wishes of, not presenting themselves in a certain way or not presenting the characters in a certain way as you're kind of playing in the heat of the moment. So yeah, it's another kind of bonus of being able to edit this darn thing.
That is a good bonus for sure. Well, you have done amazing work in being a part of the growth of this podcast, as well as your own personal growth and making it a podcast. Producing it and editing it and making it happen. And I think there's just going to be continuing growth and amazingness from D20 Dames going forward.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited.
Fingers crossed.
So if people, after listening to this, want to immediately start downloading, you mentioned that starting at episode 1 might be good, but you've had several arcs as well, too. So you don't necessarily need to start at episode 1. You might be able to start, what would be some good entry points, and maybe throw some links in there, too.
Yeah. I mean, if you are looking to hunker down, spend a couple weekends with us in the car, if you're going on a road trip, start at episode 1 for sure. Season 1, episode 1. We also have a season 2 recap, which covers a bit of season 1. So you can start there and then just pick up with season 3, which is our current season. We also, if you really want to get wild, we have a bunch of live shows, which are basically one-shots, and they all happen at what we call Emerald Forest Adventure Con. And you can just listen to those. They are completely out of context of the rest of the show. There's a tie-in with each of the live shows, so you could start back at the beginning, but you don't have to do that. But just find all the ones that say live. Those are really fun listens. There's a lot of audience participation in those too. They are recorded live, so the quality is as you'd expect. But they are super fun. And also all of those adventures, most of those adventures are actually published on the DMs Guild as one-shots
Cool.
from Kat. Yeah. So those are 2 directions. Spend a bunch of weekends with us in a car, or jump in at season 3, or just join us for live shows. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the best? I mean, D20 Dames you could probably search for and find everything, but what's the best, RSS feed or whatever that they could go to?
Yeah. So d20dames.com will give you all of the things you need to do. And then also, if you search us on any of your podcast catchers, you'll find us. D20 Dames. Yeah.
Awesome.
Beautiful. And where can people find you?
Oh, me?
Yes, just in case.
You can find me on Twitter, Brittni Lee. That is my Twitter handle. It's both of those names are spelled oddly. You can also find me streaming video games occasionally on Facebook at fb.gg/Brittni Games. Yeah, those are 2 good places.
All right. And if anyone wants to hire you to be an NPC in their campaign,
I'm getting my cards ready this weekend.
On call.
right.
So just reach
You
out.
might be hearing from me.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much,
It
Brittni.
is.
Thank
It was
you
great
both.
talking to you.
This is so much fun. Yeah,
Yes.
great talking to you too.
Thank you.
Thanks.